Hey everyone, hope you're doing great. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we'll dive into what if Deku unlocked a hero RPG system. Smash that subscribe button, and be sure to peek at the description below. Let's begin. The wind that whipped across the rooftop was a cold, indifferent thing. It tugged at the lapels of Izuku Midoriya's black Gakurin, a physical manifestation of the emptiness that had just been carved into his soul. Below, the city of Muzurifa hummed with life, a vibrant tapestry of sounds and lights that now seemed alien and distant, as if he were watching it through a thick pane of soundproof glass. Each beat of his own heart was a dull, painful thud against his ribs. The words, the final, terrible words, echoed in the hollow space where his dreams used to be. It's not bad to dream. But you also have to consider what's realistic, All Might's voice. Not the booming, confident baritone that saved citizens and inspired millions, but the tired, raspy voice of a man worn down by time and injury. It was the voice of reason, the voice of pragmatism, and it had acted as a guillotine to a lifetime of hope. Izuku's fingers, trembling and numb, tightened their grip on the chain-link fence. The metal bit into his skin, a faint, grounding pain in a sea of emotional agony. He had asked the question he had carried for a decade, a fragile, desperate plea he had saved for his one and only idol. Can I be a hero, even without a quirk? And the answer, delivered with a heavy sigh and a pained look from the symbol of peace himself, had been no. A gentle no, a sympathetic no, but a no all the same. A door slammed shut and bolted for eternity. He let go of the fence, his shoulders slumping in a posture of utter defeat. His bright yellow backpack felt like it was filled with lead. Inside, nestled amongst his school supplies, was Hero Analysis for the Future, number 13. The pages were filled with his frantic, near-obsessive scrawls, deconstructions of quirks, analyses of support gear, theories on heroic teamwork. For years, that notebook had been his shield, his proof that he could contribute, that his mind could make up for his powerless body. Now, it felt like a tome of childish fantasy, a monument to his own delusion. He shuffled toward the rooftop door, each step an immense effort. The world had lost its color. The vibrant blues of the sky, the warm oranges of the setting sun, they were all muted, washed out into a uniform, depressing gray. This was it. The end of the line. Bakugo had been right all along. His mother, with her tearful apologies, had been right. The doctors had been right. He was a broken toy in a world of wonders, a pedestrian destined to watch from the sidelines as the real players took the stage. The journey down the building's stairwell was a blur. He didn't remember opening the door or his feet hitting the steps. He was a ghost haunting his own body, a passenger in a vessel set on a miserable autopilot course for home. Once he hit the street, the sounds of the city returned, but they were warped and cruel. A child laughed, and it sounded like mockery. A distant siren wailed, a reminder of the world he was forever barred from. He clutched the strap of his backpack, his knuckles white. The charred, semi-liquefied plastic of the strap, a souvenir from his earlier encounter with the sludge villain, dug into his shoulder. His fault. That had all been his fault. If he hadn't foolishly grabbed onto All Might's leg, the hero wouldn't have dropped the bottle. The villain wouldn't have escaped. He was not just useless, he was a liability. A walking disaster zone. The thought sent a fresh wave of nausea through him. He was so lost in his self-flagellation that he almost didn't notice the crowd. A throng of people blocked the street ahead, their necks craned, phones held aloft. A familiar, sickening sight. A villain attack. Normally, this would have been a magnetic pull. He would have been instantly shoving his way to the front, notebook already in hand, his mind racing to analyze the situation. He would have been mumbling, dissecting, learning. Today, he just felt tired. He tried to turn, to find another route home. He didn't want to see it. He didn't want to be reminded of the heroics he could never perform. But then he heard the explosions. Not just any explosions. They were sharp, concussive blasts, accompanied by a furious, guttural roar that he knew as well as his own name. A cold dread, colder and sharper than the despair he'd been drowning in, lanced through him. No. It couldn't be. Forgetting his apathy, he pushed his way through the crowd, his small frame allowing him to slip through gaps. Excuse me, pardon me, he broke through to the front line, just behind the police tape, and his heart plummeted into his stomach. It was him. The sludge villain. The same amorphous, grinning monster made of green-brown filth that had tried to suffocate him less than an hour ago. He was larger now, engorged and raging in a narrow commercial alleyway, his fluid body lashing out and setting fire to the surrounding storefronts with the explosions erupting from within him. And trapped inside, right in the epicenter of the foul creature, was a boy with explosive, ash-blonde hair, Katsuki Bakugo. Izuku's blood ran cold. This wasn't just his fault anymore. This was his consequence. His mistake was suffocating someone else. The bottle All Might had captured the villain in. It must have fallen from the hero's pocket during their mid-air struggle. His stupid, selfish actions had put his childhood friend, his tormentor, but a person nonetheless, in mortal danger. The guilt was a physical blow, knocking the air from his lungs. He saw the pro-heroes on the scene. Death Arms was trying to get a punch in, but the villain's body was too fluid. He just absorbed the blows. Kamui Woods was there, but he couldn't act. The entire alley was an inferno, and his wooden body was uniquely vulnerable to fire. Empty Lady, who had debuted this morning, couldn't even fit down the narrow street. They were all there, all powerful, all completely stymied by a bad matchup. They were waiting for someone with the right quirk. He's been holding him for a while now. A man in the crowd muttered. The kid's still fighting, but he's starting to tire. Izuku's eyes locked onto Bakugo. Kaken was thrashing, setting off explosions in a desperate, panicked attempt to break free. But the sludge was smothering him, forcing its way into his mouth and nose. For a split second, their eyes met across the chaos. And in Bakugo's wide, terrified eyes, Izuku saw something he had never seen there before, not anger, not arrogance, but pure, unadulterated fear. It was a silent, desperate plea for help, and in that instant, everything else ceased to exist. The crowd, the heroes, the flames, the noise, it all faded away. All Might's words, the crushing despair, the decade of being told he was worthless, it was all incinerated by a singular, primal thought that surged through every cell of his being. Save him. He didn't think. He didn't plan. His legs, which had felt like lead moments before, were suddenly moving, pumping with a strength he didn't know he possessed. He ducked under the police tape, ignoring the shouts of the officers and heroes. Hey! Kid! Stop! It's not safe! His sneakers slapped against the pavement, carrying him toward the inferno. The world narrowed to a tunnel, the sludge villain at the far end. He wasn't running toward a villain, he was running toward a person who needed saving. It was the most heroic thing he had ever done, and he wasn't even thinking about being a hero. It was in that moment, in that mad, selfless dash toward certain death, that the universe decided to answer him. Time seemed to stretch, the roar of the fire and explosions distorting into a low, droning hum. A high-pitched whine, like an old television turning on, filled his ears, and then, a rectangular panel of translucent, cerulean blue light flickered into existence in his field of vision. It hovered there, immaterial and impossible, words forming across its surface in a clean, white, futuristic font. Heroic spirit detected in moment of ultimate self-sacrifice. Izuku's brain stuttered. What? What was this? Was he dying? Was this the fabled life flashing before your eyes, but for a nerdy gamer? Quirk factor, negative. Innate power, none. Compatibility with host spirit, 100%. Initializing heroic spirit system, 25%. 50%. 75%. 100%. His legs kept moving, but his mind was reeling. A system? Like in an RPG? It had to be a hallucination, a stress-induced fantasy. Initialization complete. The box vanished, and for a heart-stopping second, he thought it was over. But then, a new, smaller box chimed into existence in the top right corner of his vision. Welcome, player. He was 10 meters from the villain now. The heat was a physical wall, scorching his skin and crisping his hair. The stench of sewage and burnt sugar was overwhelming. The villain's giant, manic eyes swiveled to focus on him. You again? The villain gurgled, a voice of mock and malice. I'll kill you for good this time. A slimy tendril, sparking with stolen explosive power, lashed out toward him. Izuku's instinct screamed, But before he could even process the thought to dodge, another blue box appeared, this one flashing an urgent red border. Quest alert! A hero's first step. Objective: save Katsuki Bakugo from the sludge villain. Time limit: 60 seconds, until pro-hero intervention becomes impossible. Rewards: massive EXP. Title: Failure, Death of Katsuki Bakugo. Player death. The words were stark, terrifying. Player death. This was no hallucination. This was real. His mind, which had been a maelstrom of confusion, suddenly snapped into focus. The system, whatever it was, had given him a goal. An objective. He didn't have a plan. He was quirkless. He was weak. What could he possibly do? His eyes darted around frantically, and landed on the yellow backpack slung over his shoulder. Anything! His mind screamed. Just do something. He ripped the backpack off his shoulders in one fluid motion. With a desperate cry, he swung it around and hurled it directly at the villain's face. The heavy bag, filled with textbooks and his dense hero notebook, sailed through the air. A tiny, almost imperceptible notification popped up for a fraction of a second. Improvised action, backpack throw. Accuracy, 88%. Result: target temporarily blinded. The corner of the bag struck the villain square in its dominant eye. The monster recoiled with a wet squelch of surprise, its hold on Bakugo momentarily loosening. It was a tiny opening. A second, maybe two. But it was enough. Kaken! Izuku screamed, his voice raw. He closed the final distance, and began clawing desperately at the sludge imprisoning Bakugo's face. The filth was thick, viscous, and fought against his fingers. It was like trying to dig through solid tar. Deku? Bakugo choked out, his eyes wide with a mixture of terror and disbelief. What the hell are you doing here? I don't know. Izuku sobbed, his fingers scrabbling uselessly. My legs they just started moving. I couldn't just stand there and watch you die. For a fleeting second, the fury in Bakugo's eyes was replaced by something else, something shaken and vulnerable. The villain roared, recovering its senses. You little gnat! A massive wave of sludge rose up, ready to crash down and swallow Izuku whole. This was it. He was going to die. He had bought Bakugo maybe 5 seconds of air, and it was going to cost him his life. He closed his eyes, a strange sense of calm washing over him. He had acted. He had tried. He had been a hero, if only for a moment. I really am pathetic. The voice was a thunderclap that shook the very foundations of the street. Izuku's eyes snapped open. A colossal figure stood between him and the villain, silhouetted against the flames. The man's back was to him, but there was no mistaking that silhouette. 2 distinct tufts of hair, like rabbit ears. A frame that seemed to blot out the sky. All Might! Izuku breathed. I told you the tricks of the trade, but I wasn't living by them myself. All Might boomed, his fist cocked back. He was smiling his indomitable smile, but Izuku could see the blood trickling from the corner of his mouth. Pros are always risking their lives. That's the true test of a hero. The villain lunged. Detroit. Smash! The punch was not just a punch. It was a force of nature. The air pressure it generated was a physical wall, a hurricane condensed into a single instant. It struck the sludge villain and atomized him, the sheer force of the blow scattering the filth into harmless droplets. The shockwave ripped through the alley, putting out the fires in an instant, and then the sky opened up. The sudden, drastic change in atmospheric pressure caused the clouds above to condense. Rain began to fall. All Might had literally changed the weather with a single punch. Izuku, shielded by the hero's massive form, stared in silent, tear-filled awe. The crowd erupted into a deafening roar of cheers. The crisis was over. All Might stood triumphant, one fist raised to the sky. The immediate aftermath was a whirlwind of activity. Paramedics rushed in to check on Bakugo, who was coughing and shaken but otherwise unharmed. Pro-heroes, their faces a mixture of relief and embarrassment, secured the scene. Izuku, meanwhile, found himself on the receiving end of a very different kind of attention. That was incredibly reckless, kid! You could have been killed! Death Arms scolded, his thick, rock-like arms crossed over his chest. There was no reason for you to put yourself in harm's way. We had the situation under control. Kamui Woods added, his wooden face stern. They were praising Bakugo for his bravery and powerful quirk, while Izuku was being lectured for his foolishness. The injustice stung, but he was too dazed to care. His attention was elsewhere. As Kamui Woods spoke, Izuku's eyes widened. Floating just above the hero's head, in the same clean white font as before, were the words, Kamui Woods, LVL 34. Title, The Arbor Hero. Izuku blinked, hard. He shook his head, thinking it was a side effect of the adrenaline, or maybe a mild concussion. But the text remained, solid and unwavering. He looked over at Death Arms. Death Arms, LVL 38. Title, The Punching Hero. His gaze swept across the other heroes, the paramedics, the police officers. They all had them. Names, levels, and titles, floating above their heads like nameplates in a video game. It was real. The system was real. He was so absorbed in this new, impossible layer of reality that he barely registered Bakugo stalking over to him. Deku! He snarled, his voice still hoarse. I didn't need you to save me. I had it. You hear me? I didn't need your help. You didn't do anything, you quirkless wannabe. He spun around and stomped off, leaving Izuku standing alone amidst the cleanup. The words should have hurt. They were the same taunts he'd endured his whole life. But right now, they were just noise. He stumbled away from the scene, his mind a frantic buzz. He needed to be alone. He needed to understand. He walked, his pace quickening, until he found a quiet side street. He leaned against a cool brick wall, his heart hammering. He needed to confirm it. He took a deep breath and looked at his reflection in the dark glass of a closed shop window. For a moment, he just saw his own familiar, terrified face. Round, with a spray of freckles across his cheeks. A mop of messy green-black hair, still damp from All Might's rain, and wide, disbelieving green eyes. Then it appeared. The text faded into view above his reflection, stark and undeniable. Izuku Midoriya, LVL 1. Class, None. Title, Quirkless Civilian. A bitter, hysterical laugh escaped his lips. Of course. Level 1. Quirkless Civilian. The system wasn't sugarcoating anything. It was a blunt, brutal assessment of his reality. He was the absolute baseline, a starting character with no preset skills or advantages. But he was also level 1. That implied there was a level 2. It implied growth. He pushed off the wall, his mind racing. He focused on a woman walking her dog across the street. Akari Tanaka, LVL 2, Class, Civilian. It worked. He could see it on anyone. This observability, or whatever it was, seemed to be a passive skill. What else could he do? He tried to will a menu to open, thinking of the games he'd played. Status, menu, character sheet. A soft chime echoed in his head, and a larger version of the blue screen appeared before him. It was a detailed character sheet. Status, name, Izuku Midoriya, level 1 EXP, 1500/100, class, None, title, Quirkless Civilian, 10% EXP from observational tasks, minus 50% to public reputation checks, HP, 100/100, health points, MP, 50/50, mental points, SP 80/80, stamina points, stats, STR, strength 5, AGI, agility 7, END, endurance 8, INT, intelligence 14, WIS, wisdom 12, CCHE, charisma 6, HRM, heroism 18, stat points available, 0, skill points available, 0. He stared, dumbfounded. The numbers were pitifully low, especially his physical stats. STR 5 was probably less than a small child, but his INT and WIS were surprisingly high, a testament to his years of analysis. And then there was the last one. HRM. Heroism. It was his highest stat by a significant margin. What did it even do? And then he saw his EXP bar. 1500/100. He had enough experience to level up. A lot. You have enough EXP to level up. Level up? Y/N. He was about to mentally press Y when he heard it. I am here! Izuku jumped, spinning around. The system window vanished instantly. Leaning out from the corner of the street, in a theatrical pose, was All Might. All Might! What are you doing here? I thought you were swarmed by reporters. Izuku stammered, his heart doing a frantic pitter-patter for an entirely new reason. Getting away from them was a piece of cake. For I am All Might, blurg! Suddenly, in a grotesque explosion of steam, the hero deflated. The mountain of muscle and optimism vanished, replaced by a skeletal, emaciated man who looked like he would be knocked over by a stiff breeze. He coughed violently, spattering a spray of blood onto the pavement. Izuku yelped in shock, his reaction a perfect mirror of their earlier encounter on the rooftop. But this time, something was different. As the steam cleared, the text above the hero's head flickered and changed. The bold, regal font that had read All Might 1 Pro Hero LVL glitched out. For a split second, it was a mess of pixels before resolving into something new, something plainer. Tashinori Yagi, LVL? Title, the symbol of peace waning. Below the name, a new line of text appeared, glowing a faint, sickly red. Status effect, grievous internal injury, permanent, worsening. Izuku's breath hitched. It wasn't just a transformation. It was a wound. A permanent, worsening wound. The system was giving him data that went beyond sight. It was telling him the core truth of the man standing before him. The question marks on the level indicated a gap so vast he couldn't even quantify it, but the status effect told a story of profound weakness. Kid, I've come to thank you, and to revise what I said earlier, Tashinori said, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. And to make you a proposition. Izuku was barely listening, his mind still processing the permanent debuff. That meant Recovery Girl couldn't fix it. It meant no current medical science could fix it. It was a slow, inevitable decline. If you hadn't been there, Tashinori continued, his voice low and serious, if you hadn't told me your story, I would have been nothing but a fake, talking the talk but not walking the walk. So thank you? Oh no! It was my fault he was there in the first place. I just got in your way. Izuku mumbled, defaulting to his usual self-deprecation. That's not true, Tashinori said, his hollow eyes sharp and intense. Of all the heroes on the scene, and all the onlookers, you were the only one who acted. A scared, quirkless boy. You spurred me to action. He paused, a solemn gravity entering his voice. All the great heroes have stories from their early days where their bodies moved before they could think. That's what happened to you back there, wasn't it? Izuku looked down, tears welling in his eyes. He couldn't speak, so he just nodded, a choked sob escaping him. For his entire life, that one trait, his impulsive need to help, had been framed as a weakness, a reckless flaw. But All Might, the greatest hero of all, was telling him it was the mark of a true hero. The system chimed softly. Your heroism, HRM, stat has risen by 2, that's why I've come to you, Tashinori said, a strange light in his eyes. He stood up a little straighter, a shadow of his grander form seeming to flicker around him. I have judged you worthy. You have the heart, the spirit, and the selflessness. He locked his gaze with Izuku's. I offer you my power. My quirk is yours to inherit. Izuku's brain came to a dead halt. The world tilted on its axis. He stared at the skeletal man, at the grim status effect hanging over his head, and tried to parse the words. Inherit his quirk? What? He stammered. Inherit your quirk? But quirks are genetic. You can't just give one away. You've never heard of it, have you? Tashinori chuckled, a dry, rattling sound. The greatest mystery of the hero world. My quirk is called One for All. He held up one hand, a faint, ethereal light beginning to glow around it. It is a sacred torch, a power passed down from one generation to the next. I am the 8th wielder, and I believe that you, Izuku Midoriya, are worthy of becoming the 9th. He explained the nature of the power, a stockpiling quirk fused with the ability to be passed on. He told the story of its origin, of the battle against its nemesis, all for one. As he spoke, Izuku's observer skills seemed to be working overtime, feeding his INT stat, helping him connect the dots. The grievous injury, the time limit, the desperate search for a successor, it all snapped into a coherent, tragic picture. This wasn't just an offer. It was a plea. The symbol of peace was dying, and he needed someone to carry the torch. The weight of it all was crushing. The despair of the rooftop. The terror of the villain attack. The impossible appearance of the system. And now this, an offer that was the culmination of every dream he'd ever had. He looked at All Might, at Toshinori Yagi, and saw not a god, but a man. A man who had shouldered the world's hopes for decades and was now looking for someone to share the burden. Could he do it? Could he, a level 1 quirkless weakling, possibly live up to that legacy? The logical part of his brain, the part that saw his pitiful STR stat of 5, screamed no. It was impossible. He would break under the strain. But the other part of him, the part that made him run toward the sludge villain, the part the system had identified as a heroic spirit, roared with a defiant yes. He wiped the tears from his eyes, his expression hardening with a resolve he had never felt before. He had been given a second chance. No, a third. The system. And now one for all. He would not waste them. As this profound, life-altering decision crystallized in his soul, the system responded. The world seemed to hold its breath as a new notification, larger and more ornate than any before it, materialized in front of him. It wasn't just a quest. The border was gilded, and the text glowed with a faint, golden light. Main quest issued, successor to the symbol of peace. The torch of hope has been offered to you. The world's greatest hero has chosen you to carry on his legacy and protect the future. Part 1. Inherit the power. Objective. Train your body to be a worthy vessel for One for All and inherit the quirk from Toshinori Yagi. Rewards. The quirk One for All, legendary class the 9th. Failure. A broken body. A shattered dream. A fading light. The quest notification hung in the air between him and Toshinori, a contract written in light. Izuka looked from the impossible words to the hopeful, desperate face of his idol. His voice, when it came, was not the shaky murmur of a boy. It was clear, steady, and filled with a power he had never known. I'll do it, Izuka Midoriya said. I accept. And as he spoke the words, he mentally, decisively, pressed Y. Level up. You are now level 2. Level up. You are now level 3. Level up. You are now level 15. You have 70 stat points and 14 skill points to distribute. The world didn't just have color again. It was blazing with incandescent light. Izuka woke before his alarm. This was a new and unusual phenomenon. Typically, his mornings were a frantic, desperate battle against the siren song of his snooze button. But today, consciousness returned to him not as a gradual ascent from slumber, but as a sudden, sharp snap into awareness. For a moment, he lay perfectly still, staring at the familiar All Might posters on his ceiling, his heart thumping a steady, powerful rhythm against his ribs. Everything felt different. The air in his room seemed to sparkle with unseen potential. The muted gray light filtering through his curtains held the promise of a sunrise, not just another day. He sat up, swinging his legs over the side of the bed, and a chorus of aches and pains sang out from his muscles. The sprint to save Kaken, the tension of the aftermath, it had all left its mark, but even the pain felt different. It wasn't the dull ache of uselessness. It was the sharp, satisfying soreness of exertion. The pain of having done something. Then he remembered. The system. All Might. One for all. It all came rushing back in a dizzying, exhilarating flood. He half expected it to have been a dream, a fantastically detailed hallucination brought on by stress and a blow to the head he didn't remember receiving. But as he focused his thoughts, a soft, internal chime echoed in his mind, and the translucent blue screen of his status menu flickered into existence before his eyes. It was still there. It was real. You have 70 stat points and 14 skill points to distribute. The message glowed patiently at the bottom of the screen. 70 points. It was an astronomical number for a level 1 character. The reward for his desperate, heroic act. He had 14 levels worth of growth waiting to be claimed. He felt a giddy, lightheaded sensation, the kind a gamer gets when they find a legendary loot drop in the starting zone. He took a deep breath, forcing himself to calm down. This wasn't a game. The consequences were real. His allocation of these points would directly affect his ability to become a worthy vessel for One for All. He couldn't afford to be reckless. His eyes scanned his base stats. STR 5. AGI 7, and 8, Int 14, WIS 12, CHA 6, HRM 20. His mental stats, INT and WIS, were already respectable. A legacy of a lifetime spent analyzing, observing, and thinking. His heroism stat was an oddity, an outlier that was apparently his defining feature. But his physical stats, they were abysmal. A strength of 5 was probably less than the average elementary schooler. An endurance of 8 explained why he was always winded after running up a flight of stairs. To wield the power of All Might, a power that could change the weather with a single punch, these numbers needed to skyrocket. All Might's training plan, the American Dream Plan, was focused on cleaning an entire beach. That meant hauling, lifting, carrying. It was a test of raw physical labor. The path was clear. Okay, think, he mumbled, the old habit flaring up. The primary goal is to build muscle and durability. That means strength and endurance are the top priorities. Strength to move the heavy objects, and endurance to be able to do it for more than 5 minutes without collapsing. Agility is important for a hero, but less so for cleaning a beach. I'll need it later for combat, but for now, base building is key. He mentally focused on the plus sign next to his STR stat. The number changed from 5 to 6, and a point was subtracted from his available pool. He felt a faint, almost imperceptible warmth spread through his arms. It wasn't a sudden surge of power, more like the pleasant feeling of blood returning to a numb limb. He grinned. This was incredible. He could literally quantify his own improvement. He began the allocation in earnest. He decided on a 2-to-2 ratio for STR and END, with 1 point going into AGI for every cycle. He needed to move trash, but he also needed to not trip over it. Click. STR, 25. Click. N 25. Click. AGI 10. He had spent 40 points. He felt a profound change ripple through his body. The dull soreness in his muscles didn't vanish, but it was now overlaid with a thrumming sense of potential, a coiled readiness. He stood up and did a tentative squat. It felt easier, smoother. The creaks in his knees were gone. He still had 30 points left. He was tempted to pour them all into STR, to feel what it was like to be truly strong for the first time in his life. But his wisdom stat, a humble 12, pulsed with a gentle warning: don't overspecialize. A hero needs to be balanced. And he didn't know what lay ahead. What if he needed charisma to de-escalate a situation? Or more intelligence to solve a complex problem on the fly? He decided to save the remaining 30 points. It was a strategic reserve. He could allocate them on the fly if a situation demanded it. Next, the skill points. 14 of them. He mentally opened the skills tab. It was mostly empty, a vast, unexplored tree of possibilities. There were 2 main branches visible, general skills and class skills, locked. A third, grayed out branch was labeled one for all, awaiting inheritance. Under general skills, he saw a few basic, tantalizing options. Observer LVL 1, passive, cost to upgrade, 1 SP. Gamer's Mind LVL Max, passive. Gamer's Body LVL Max, passive. Power Strike LVL 0/10 cost to unlock, 2 SP. Dash LVL 0/10 cost to unlock, 1 SP. Gamer's Mind and Gamer's Body were already maxed out, fundamental parts of the system. Gamer's Mind explained the preternatural calm he'd felt when running at the villain. It kept his mind clear in high-stress situations. Gamer's Body converted real-world damage into a system of HP and status effects. It meant he could survive things that should kill him, but it didn't make him invincible. Upgrading Observer seemed like a good idea. More information was always better. He spent a point. Observer has leveled up to LVL 2. Can now display basic emotional states and power levels on observed targets. He tested it on his own reflection. Izuku Midoriya, LVL 15. Emotional state, determined, anxious. It worked. He felt a thrill of discovery. This tool was insanely useful. He then unlocked Dash, an AGI-based skill. For just 1 point, it seemed like a bargain. A short burst of speed could mean the difference between life and death. That left him with 12 skill points. Power Strike was tempting, but the description implied it was for combat. His current task was labor. He decided to save the rest of his skill points, just as he had with his stat points. Prudence was the better part of valor. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. I am here! At the entrance to Dagoba Municipal Beach Park. It is time to begin your journey, young Midoriya. All Might. Izuku's heart leaped. He quickly dressed in an old t-shirt and sweats, grabbed a water bottle, and sprinted out the door, calling a hasty, "I'm going for a run!" to his mother. He felt lighter on his feet than ever before, his newly upgraded AGI making his movements feel fluid and efficient. He arrived at the beach park as the sun was cresting the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink. The beautiful sunrise was a stark, cruel contrast to the scene before him. Dagoba Beach wasn't just messy, it was a graveyard. For decades, illegal dumping, facilitated by ocean currents, had turned this once beautiful stretch of coastline into a mountain range of forgotten things. Towers of rusted cars, fields of broken appliances, and dunes of miscellaneous scrap metal stretched as far as the eye could see. The salty air was thick with the metallic tang of decay, and standing atop a precariously balanced refrigerator, his silhouette a beacon of hope against the rising sun, was All Might in his magnificent muscle form. "Young Midoriya! You made it!" he boomed, his voice scattering a flock of seagulls. He leaped down, landing without a sound despite his bulk. "Behold! A monument to modern society's neglect! A perfect training ground for a budding hero." Izuku stared at the seemingly infinite expanse of junk, his newfound confidence wavering. All of this? All of this?" All Might confirmed cheerfully. "My alma mater, UA, isn't some run-of-the-mill school. The physical entrance exam is incredibly demanding. You need a body forged in the fires of effort to even stand a chance, let alone handle my quirk. So, for the next 10 months, this will be your gym, your classroom, and your crucible. You will restore this entire coastline to its former glory." He gestured to a particularly large pile of debris. "This is my custom-tailored American dream plan. It is a regimen so intense it will make you cry. But if you can complete it, your body will be ready." As All Might spoke, his words resonating with heroic gravitas, Izuku's system chimed in with its own, more practical interpretation. Main quest updated, successor to the symbol of peace. Part 1 Objective Update. Complete the American Dream Plan by clearing Dagoba Municipal Beach Park in 10 months. New daily quest generated. Daily quest, Trash Taker. Objective, clear 100 kilograms of trash from the beach. Reward, 50 XP, small stamina potion, X1. Daily quest, Physical Conditioning I. Objective, run 5 kilometers, perform 50 push-ups, 50 sit-ups. Reward 30 XP. Izuku's eyes widened. The system had just gamified the entire training arc. He now had clear, daily, measurable goals. This impossible mountain of a task was now a series of manageable steps. I understand, All Might," Izuku said, his voice filled with a fresh wave of determination. "I won't let you down, that's the spirit!" All Might bellowed, handing him a pair of thick work gloves. "Now let's begin." The first day was hell. Even with his newly allocated stats, the sheer reality of the labor was crushing. His STR of 25 didn't make him a Superman, it just elevated him from hopelessly weak to barely adequate. He started with a small, rusted washing machine. He heaved and pulled, his muscles screaming in protest. His stamina points, SP, which he could now see as a thin green bar in his peripheral vision, drained at an alarming rate. After just 10 minutes of intense effort, the bar was nearly empty, flashing a dangerous red warning, SP at 5%. Continued exertion will result in the exhaustion debuff. Exhaustion, all stats temporarily reduced by 50%. SP recovery rate severely slowed. Heeding the warning, Izuku collapsed onto the sand, panting heavily. All Might, who was casually bench pressing a small car to demonstrate proper form, looked over. "Feeling the burn already, my boy? That's good. Push past your limits." Izuku wanted to, but the system provided a more nuanced picture. Pushing past his limits recklessly would cripple his efficiency for the rest of the day. The smart way to train wasn't to burn out, but to manage his resources. He rested, watching his SP bar slowly refill. Once it hit 50%, he got back to work. This became his rhythm. Work until the SP warning, rest until he was partially recovered, then repeat. It was a grueling, monotonous cycle. By midday, his hands were raw, his back was a knot of agony, and he had only managed to move a few large appliances to the designated pickup area. He had cleared maybe 70 kilograms of his 100 kilograms daily quest goal. It was then that he remembered his most powerful tool was not his strength, but his mind, and the system that augmented it. Frustrated and tired, he stopped and simply looked at a complex, interwoven pile of scrap. He activated Observer. The world shifted. The pile was no longer just a pile. It was a network of data. Interlocked scrap pile. Composition: rusted steel beams, discarded piping, sheet metal. Structural integrity: unstable. Key support beam located at the base, currently under high tension. Analysis: applying lateral force to the key support beam, estimated force required 300 N, has a 92% chance of causing a controlled collapse of the upper section, dislodging approximately 250 kilograms of material. Izuku's jaw dropped. It was a cheat code. A physics engine for reality. He didn't have to brute force everything. He could solve the beach like a puzzle. He found a long, thick pipe to use as a lever and a sturdy block of concrete as a fulcrum. He positioned them exactly as his analysis suggested. He took a deep breath, braced himself, and pushed. For a moment, there was resistance, and then with a groan of tortured metal, the key beam shifted. The entire upper half of the pile cascaded down with a thunderous crash, landing neatly on the clear sand beside the main heap. It had taken him 2 minutes and a fraction of his SP to do what would have taken an hour of manual labor. Huh! All Might, who had been offering words of encouragement from afar, jogged over, his expression one of bewilderment. Young Midoriya, what was that? I thought that section would take you all afternoon. Izuku's mind raced. He couldn't exactly say. My internal HUD told me where to push. He fell back on his old self. I was just looking at it, and it sort of seemed like if I pushed on this one part here, the whole thing was unbalanced, you see, because the center of gravity was too high relative to the base, and this beam was clearly taking most of the torsional stress, so I figured a little leverage. He devolved into his signature high-speed mumbling, a flurry of terms about physics and engineering that he only half understood but could recite thanks to years of obsessive study. All Might stared at him, his brow furrowed. Then, he let out a hearty laugh. Aha! Of course! You're not just working with your body, but with your mind. Your analytical abilities are truly top-notch, my boy. Ingenious. Izuku blushed, relieved that his rambling had worked as a cover. All Might clapped him on the back, nearly sending him face first into the sand. The hero was amazed, but he accepted the explanation. To him, Izuku was a super nerd who was applying his intellect to manual labor. He had no idea the analysis was being fed to him by an invisible interface. With this new methodology, Izuku's efficiency skyrocketed. He completed his Trash Taker quest before lunch. Daily quest. Trash Taker complete. Reward 50 XP, small stamina potion, X1, have been added to your inventory. He mentally pictured an inventory screen, and it appeared. It was a simple grid, with one slot occupied by a small, glowing green vial. He willed it into his hand. It materialized out of thin air with a soft pop, feeling cool and solid. He downed it in one go. It tasted like mint and electrolytes. His SP bar, which was at 20%, instantly shot back up to 100%. He stared at his empty hands in wonder. This changed everything. The next few months blurred into a relentless, productive grind. Every morning before school, every afternoon after, and all day on weekends, Izuku was at the beach. He completed his daily quests without fail, the small but steady trickle of EXP slowly pushing his level higher. Each level up granted him 5 more stat points, which he diligently poured into his STR, YND, and AGI. His body began to change. The soft, undefined roundness of a sedentary teenager was burned away, replaced by lean, hard muscle. His stamina grew, his SP bar becoming a deeper and deeper well. He learned to read the beach, both with his eyes and with Observer. He could tell the difference between stable and unstable piles of junk from 100 meters away. He became a master of leverage, fulcrums, and controlled demolition. All Might's astonishment grew with each passing week. The boy's progress was simply phenomenal. He was not just on schedule with the American Dream Plan, he was significantly ahead of it. "Young Midoriya," he said one afternoon, about 3 months into the training. Izuku was now level 18. "I must confess, your progress is beyond anything I could have anticipated. Your determination is one thing, but your methods, you dismantle these scrap heaps with the precision of a surgeon. It's uncanny." Izuku had just finished dislodging a half-buried bus chassis by digging out the sand around one axle to intentionally destabilize it. "It's just physics, All Might," he said, wiping sweat from his brow. It was his standard catch-all excuse, but All Might knew it was more than that. He'd seen other people try to work smart. None of them did it with the impossible, unerring accuracy that Izuku displayed. Still, he couldn't argue with the results. The boy was becoming a vessel of iron, forged through intelligence as much as effort. The true turning point came during the 4th month. There was one object on the beach that had defeated them both: a massive, industrial-grade freezer unit, the kind from a commercial fishing vessel. It was a solid block of rusted steel and insulation, half submerged in the compacted, wet sand near the tide line. It probably weighed over 2 tons. All Might, in his muscle form, had tried to move it, and had only managed to shift it a few inches. He had declared it would require heavy machinery, but to Izuku, it was a challenge. A boss fight. For weeks, he'd been analyzing it with Observer whenever he passed by, gathering data. Commercial freezer unit. Weight: 2,550 kilograms. Status: firmly lodged in compacted wet sand. Main anchor point is the corroded lower hinge mount, fused with a section of rebar buried below. Vulnerability: the upper hinge assembly is severely rusted. A precise, high-impact force delivered to the connecting bolt could cause a shear failure. The problem was the force required. His normal strength wasn't enough. But he had been saving his skill points. He was level 19 now, with a horde of points waiting to be used. It was time for an upgrade. That night in his room, he opened his skill tree. It was time to unlock Power Strike. Power Strike LVL 0/10, a skill that focuses physical power and stamina into a single point of impact. Increases the force of the next physical blow at the cost of SP. Cost to unlock: 2 SP. He spent the points. The node on the skill tree lit up. Skill unlocked. Power Strike LVL 1. Power Strike LVL 1 increases force of a single strike by 50%. Cost: 30 SP. Cooldown: 10 seconds. A 50% increase. That might just be enough. He dumped 4 more skill points into it. Power Strike LV 5/10 increases force of a single strike by 250%. Cost: 70 SP. Cooldown: 5 seconds. A 250% force multiplier. That was more like it. He felt a new kind of energy hum within his muscles, a kinetic potential just waiting for a command. The next day, he approached the freezer with a new sense of purpose. All Might was on the other side of the beach, busy hauling a collection of tires. This was the perfect time. Izuku found a long, dense iron rod, one of the few pieces of scrap he deemed useful enough to keep. It would be his weapon. He positioned himself, his feet sinking into the sand to find a solid purchase. He raised the heavy rod over his shoulder like a sledgehammer. He took a deep breath, his eyes fixed on the rusted bolt Observer had highlighted for him. "Skill activate Power Strike," he whispered. A faint, cerulean aura that only he could see enveloped his arms and the iron rod. His SP bar instantly dropped by 70 points. He felt the strength in his body coalesce, flowing from his legs through his core and into his arms, all focusing on one single, explosive action. He swung. The iron rod whistled through the air. The impact was not the dull thud of metal on metal. It was a sharp, explosive crack like a rifle shot. The rusted bolt, unable to withstand the focused, amplified force, sheared clean off. The top of the massive freezer door shuddered, disconnected from its upper hinge. Its immense weight, now unsupported, caused the entire unit to groan and lurch sideways. With a great sucking sound, it tore free from the wet sand and toppled over onto the beach with a cataclysmic boom that sent sand flying in all directions. Izuku stumbled back, his arms vibrating from the impact, his breathing ragged. He had done it. By the Founding Fathers! What was that? All Might was sprinting across the beach toward him, his face a mask of utter disbelief. He had seen the whole thing. He had seen the boy, who barely weighed 70 kilograms himself, strike the 2-ton freezer once and topple it. It was not a feat of leverage. It was a feat of impossible, inexplicable force. Young Midoriya. How? All Might asked, his voice losing its usual boom, replaced by quiet, serious confusion. He looked from Izuku's trembling arms to the fallen metal behemoth. I tried to move that. I know how much it weighs. That shouldn't be possible for you. Not yet, Izuku's heart hammered. The physics excuse wouldn't work here. That wasn't an application of intellect. It was a pure, raw display of power. He was cornered. I don't know, he stammered, which was partially true. I just focused. I put everything I had into that one single spot. Like trying to hit a nail with a hammer, you don't just tap it, you concentrate all the force into the swing, right? I just did that, but more. He was desperately trying to describe power strike without using the words. All Might stared at him, his hollow eyes searching Izuku's face. He saw the genuine exhaustion, the frantic pulse in the boy's neck. He saw the truth of the effort. But the result was still disproportionate. To focus your strength to that degree. All Might murmured, more to himself than to Izuku. That's not just training. That's a level of bodily control and kinetic channeling that most pros take years to master. You're not just building muscle, my boy. You're learning to use it with terrifying efficiency. He placed a hand on Izuku's shoulder, his expression a mixture of pride, awe, and a little bit of fear. You continue to surprise me, young Midoriya. You are a vessel of boundless potential. All Might finally accepted it, not because it made sense, but because it was the only explanation he had. He classified it as another aspect of Izuku's mysterious genius, an innate, prodigal talent for biomechanics and power application. The gap between what he saw and what should be possible was simply filled by the label. Izuku Midoriya's unique brand of amazing. For Izuku, it was a massive relief. His secret was safe. And he now had a new toy. For the rest of the day, he practiced Power Strike. He learned its nuances, the way it felt to activate, the precise drain on his stamina. He used it on smaller things, shattering large rocks into manageable pebbles and punching clean holes through rusted refrigerators. He was no longer just cleaning a beach. He was honing a weapon. The final 6 months passed in a similar vein, a blur of relentless work and systematic progression. The beach, once a mountain range of despair, slowly flattened. Sunlight began to touch sand that hadn't seen the sky in half a century. Izuku's body was completely transformed. He was no longer scrawny. He was solid, corded with the dense, practical muscle of a laborer, but with the lean definition of an athlete. His status screen reflected this incredible change. He was level 24. His STR and END were both over 60. His AGI was a respectable 35. On the final day of the 10th month, Izuku stood before a completely, spotlessly clean coastline. The last piece of scrap, a single bent hubcap, was in his hands. The sun was setting, casting a golden glow over the pristine sand and the gentle waves lapping at the shore. He turned to see All Might, in his skeletal form, standing there with a smartphone. He was recording. "Go on, my boy," Toshinori said, his voice thick with emotion. Izuku took a deep breath. He let out a primal scream of triumph, a roar that carried all the pain, effort, and victory of the past 10 months. He threw the hubcap into the back of the pickup truck, the final punctuation mark on an epic sentence. He climbed atop the cleared-out pickup truck, turned to face the sunset over the ocean he had reclaimed, and raised his fists to the sky. He was exhausted, aching, but he had never felt more powerful in his life. He looked at his system notifications. Main quest objective complete. The American Dream Plan. Massive EXP awarded. Level up. You are now level 25. Your body is now a suitable vessel for One for All. Title unlocked. Tireless worker. 10% to all EXP gains from physical labor, 5 TND. Toshinori looked at the boy, no, the young man, silhouetted against the sunset. He was astounded. Izuku hadn't just completed the plan. He had surpassed it, finishing weeks ahead of the most optimistic schedule. He had turned his body into a steel chalice, ready to receive a power that could shatter lesser men. He smiled, a true, genuine smile that reached his weary eyes. Oh my goodness, he whispered, looking at the picture on his phone. He walked over to the triumphant boy. Excellent work, Toshinori said, his voice filled with more pride than Izuku had ever heard. You have exceeded all my expectations. You are ready. The UA entrance exam was in the morning. Tonight, Izuku Midoriya would inherit one for all. The 10-month grind was over. The real game was about to begin. The sun had fully risen, bathing the newly pristine Dagoba beach in a light that felt like absolution. The gentle lapping of the waves on the shore was the only sound, a peaceful rhythm that belied the monumental effort that had purchased this serenity. Izuku Midoriya stood atop the bed of the pickup truck, his chest heaving, every muscle in his body a finely tuned symphony of exhaustion and triumph. The 10-month-long shadow that had loomed over his life had finally receded. He had not just met the challenge, he had conquered it. He looked at his hands. They were no longer the soft, unmarked hands of a student. They were calloused, scarred, and strong. He could see the lean, powerful muscles of his forearms tense as he clenched his fists. The status screen, which he could now call up with a mere thought, confirmed the physical reality. His strength and endurance stats, once pitiful single-digit numbers, now stood proudly above 60. He was, by any objective measure, a formidable physical specimen, a world away from the fragile boy who had stood on a rooftop just 10 months ago. And yet, as he looked out at the ocean, a sliver of the old fear remained. He had a hero's body, forged through a Herculean effort. But he was still quirkless. The UA entrance exam was tomorrow. He had the physique, but in a world of explosions, anti-gravity, and engines, would a strong body be enough? The doubt was a cold stone in his stomach. You did it, my boy. The voice, quiet and raspy, pulled him from his thoughts. Toshinori Yagi stood on the sand below, his skeletal frame looking almost frail against the vastness of the reclaimed beach. The usual booming optimism of his all-might form was absent, replaced by a raw, undisguised pride that shone in his sunken eyes. Izuku hopped down from the truck, landing with a light thud. All Might, he said, his voice still a little hoarse from his victory cry. You've done more than just clean a beach, you know, Toshinori said, walking alongside him as they began to head for the street. Any hired crew with heavy machinery could have done that. This was an act of service. You gave this piece of the community back to the people. You performed a heroic act, day in and day out, with no one watching and no one to thank you. That is the foundational character of a true hero. More important than any muscle. Izuku felt a warmth spread through his chest that had nothing to do with physical exertion. The system chimed softly in his mind. Your heroism, HRM, stat has risen by 1. Even now, his spirit was being measured and rewarded. They walked in comfortable silence for a while, the sounds of the city gradually replacing the whisper of the waves. The morning traffic was starting to build, people heading to work and school, oblivious to the quiet miracle that had just been completed. Are you nervous about tomorrow? Toshinori asked, breaking the silence. Terrified, Izuku admitted without hesitation. It felt good to be honest. I've done all the training. I'm stronger than I ever imagined I could be. But the exam, it's full of kids with powerful quirks they've had their whole lives. I'm just strong. And I can hit things with a metal pipe really well. Toshinori chuckled, a dry, rattling sound. You have more than that, young Midoriya. You have a mind that sees solutions others miss. I've watched you. You don't just work hard, you work smart. That's a greater weapon than any quirk. Izuku knew he was referring to his analysis, his uncanny ability to find the weak points in piles of scrap. He felt a familiar pang of guilt for the deception, but what could he say? My video game interface helps me solve physics puzzles. It was absurd. Their walk ended at Izuku's apartment building. Get some rest today, Toshinori advised, placing a bony hand on his shoulder. Eat a good meal. Your body needs to recover. The final step is tomorrow, before the exam. Meet me back at the beach. Dawn. With a final, meaningful nod, the symbol of peace turned and blended into the morning crowd. The rest of the day was surreal. He took the longest, hottest shower of his life, washing away the grime and sweat of his final day of labor. When he looked in the mirror, the stranger from 10 months ago was completely gone. In his place was a young man with clear eyes and a body that hummed with latent energy. His mother's reaction was a study in tearful joy. When he came into the kitchen for breakfast, she just stared at him for a solid minute, her hand over her mouth. Izuku, oh honey, look at you, she whispered. Inko Midoriya had watched his transformation with a mixture of pride and constant, simmering worry. She'd seen him come home every day, covered in filth and nursing new bruises, his appetite growing to rival that of a pro wrestler. Now, seeing him stand tall and confident, the worry receded, leaving only pride. I made you a huge katsudon, she said, her voice thick with emotion. You've earned it. He ate with a ravenous hunger, his body screaming for calories to repair and rebuild. As he ate, he discreetly checked his mother's status with Observer. Inko Midoriya, LVL4, class, civilian, emotional state, proud, worried, loving. He smiled. The system might be a cold, logical interface, but it could quantify love. That was something special. He spent the rest of the day in a state of quiet anticipation. He reviewed his hero notebooks, but the analysis felt different now. It wasn't the desperate scribbling of a powerless fan, it was the strategic preparation of a future combatant. He allocated his last few saved-up stat points, rounding out his STR and END to an even 65 each, and bumping his AGI to 40. The rest he kept in reserve. Sleep did not come easily. The anticipation for the morning was a live wire in his veins. He wasn't just going to take an exam. He was going to receive a miracle. The pre-dawn air was cool and crisp when he arrived back at the beach. The sand was a canvas of pale gold, wiped clean of all its former scars. Tashinori was already there, standing at the water's edge in his muscle form, a titan greeting the dawn. You're here, All Might said, his voice a low rumble. Are you ready, my boy? Izuku's heart hammered against his ribs. He could only nod, his throat suddenly dry. There is no grand ceremony, All Might said, a wry smile on his face. No ancient ritual. The process is rather mundane. He reached up and plucked a single strand of his iconic, golden hair. It caught the first rays of the sun, glowing like a filament of pure light. He held it out to Izuku in the palm of his hand. Here, he said, his smile widening into a full, brilliant grin. Eat this. Izuku stared. First at the hair, then at All Might's beaming face, then back at the hair. His brain, the same one that could deconstruct physics puzzles and hero tactics in seconds, screeched to a halt. Huh! Was the only sound he could manage. To inherit my power, you have to ingest some of my DNA. This is the quickest, most direct way. All Might explained, his tone utterly serious. Izuku's observer skill, ever helpful, kicked in automatically. Item, All Might's hair, legendary. Category, power conduit. Description, a strand of hair from the one hero, All Might. Contains a potent concentration of his DNA, which acts as a transfer medium for the quirk One for All. Effect, consuming this item will initiate the transfer of One for All. Side effects may include indigestion. The system itself seemed to be in on the joke. Izuku looked at the hair, then at All Might's expectant face. This was the culmination of his life's dream, the key to his entire future, and it was being presented to him like a piece of lint to be swallowed. A hysterical giggle escaped him. It was the most absurd, ridiculous, and utterly perfect moment of his life. Right, he said, taking a deep, fortifying breath. He picked up the single strand of hair. It felt surprisingly coarse. For the future, he mumbled to himself. He placed it on his tongue. It tasted like hair. He swallowed hard. It went down, a tiny, scratchy lump. For a moment, nothing happened. He stood there, feeling profoundly anticlimactic. Did it work? He asked, looking at All Might, and then it hit him. It started not as a feeling, but as a sound, a low, deep hum that resonated from the marrow of his bones. It was the sound of a universe being born. Then came the light, an incandescent supernova igniting in the core of his being. It was not hot, it was pure, unadulterated energy, a billion lightning storms contained within a teacup. His system, which had been a quiet, orderly companion for 10 months, went absolutely haywire. Blue screens flashed in his vision, overlapping and screaming for his attention, a chaotic cascade of information overload. Legendary power source detected, acquiring quirk, one for all, analyzing compatibility with new host. The energy surged through him, a tidal wave of raw power crashing against the dam of his physical form. He felt his own strength, the hard-won product of his 10-month grind, as nothing more than a paper-thin barrier against this infinite ocean. His HP and SP bars, visible in his periphery, flickered and glitched, numbers racing up and down as the system struggled to quantify the cataclysm happening inside him. Analysis complete. Host compatibility, 4.7%. Warning! User body durability is insufficient for full output. Attempting to use 100% of one for all will result in total system failure and host termination. The words host termination flashed in sync with the violent, painful throbbing in his veins. So this was it. Even after all that training, his body was still laughably inadequate. 4.7% compatible. He was trying to run a star on a pair of AA batteries. He fell to his knees with a choked gasp, his whole body trembling violently. The power was a wild, untamed god raging inside him, and it wanted out. Easy, my boy, easy! All Might's voice cut through the storm. A strong hand rested on his shoulder, grounding him. Breathe. It feels like a storm, I know. You have to anchor it. Center it. Will it to obey. Izuku squeezed his eyes shut, his knuckles white as he pressed them into the sand. Obey? It was like trying to command a hurricane to be still. But All Might's words gave him a focal point. He tried to mentally grasp the raging power, to contain it within his core. The system continued its frantic notifications, but they were becoming more orderly now, less like alarms and more like installation prompts. New skill tree unlocked, one for all. New resource bar unlocked. OFA synchronization percent. Current synchronization, 1%. The one for all skill tree is now available. Mastering this power requires increasing your synchronization percentage through training, understanding, and heroic deeds. A new goal. A tangible, measurable path forward. It wasn't just about getting stronger anymore. It was about becoming in sync with this living power. The raging storm began to subside, not vanishing, but receding into a dormant, yet terrifyingly potent state, like a sleeping volcano. The trembling eased. Izuku was left panting on the sand, drenched in a cold sweat. He felt different. He felt the same, but with an immense, coiled power now residing deep within him. It was a constant presence, a low-level hum of cosmic energy at the base of his soul. You weathered it, Toshinori said, helping him to his feet. Faster than I did, I might add. I spent the first hour throwing up. Izuku managed a weak smile. I feel like I'm plugged into a power plant. That's a good way of putting it, Toshinori agreed. Now, the exam is in a few hours. We don't have much time, but you need to feel it. Just once. Try to call it forth. Just a little bit. Remember what I said on the rooftop. Clench your butt cheeks and yell smash from the bottom of your heart. Izuku nodded, his expression turning serious. He had a new skill tree. He needed to see what it contained. Mentally, he navigated the system interface, his thoughts now crisp and clear thanks to Gamer's Mind. He tabbed over to the skills section. The one for all branch was now glowing a vibrant, electric green. He opened it. The tree was vast and complex, a web of interconnected nodes. At the base was the one skill he now possessed. Power stockpiling, passive, LVL1/, the core of one for all. Stores an immense amount of raw power. Current stored power vastly exceeds host's output capacity. Branching from that were dozens of grayed-out skills. He saw names that resonated with All Might's legacy. Texas Smash, California Smash, United States of Smash, but the ones closest to the core were more fundamental. Smash, active, LVL 1 out of 10, locked unleashes a portion of OFA's stockpiled power in a single, devastating blow. Power flick, active, LVL 1/10, lock channels a small, precise burst of OFA into a single finger for a ranged air pressure attack. And then there was the big one, a major node that seemed to be a gateway to a whole new section of the tree. Full cowling, active, LVL 1/20, lock distributes a manageable percentage of 1 for all's power evenly throughout the entire body, dramatically increasing all physical parameters. Prerequisites to unlock: 15% synchronization, Yendi 80, AGI 70, skill, energy distribution, LVL 1. It was a roadmap. A clear, delineated path to mastery. It wasn't just about clenching his buttocks. It was about meeting quantifiable stat and skill checks. The gamer in him rejoiced. But for now, all of it was locked. He had the fuel, but no engine. He had to make his own. He faced an old, weather-worn rock formation at the edge of the beach, a jagged stone sentinel that had survived a century of storms. It would be his target. Okay, he said, taking a deep breath. Here goes nothing. He thought of All Might's signature move. The Detroit Smash. The move that had saved him, that had changed the weather. He wanted to feel that power, just a taste of it. He fell into a ready stance, pulling his right arm back. He focused on the well of energy inside him, the sleeping volcano, and commanded it to awaken. He felt the power answer his call. It surged from his core, an uncontrollable torrent flooding his arm. It was far, far more than he had anticipated. His entire arm lit up with a terrifying, beautiful network of red, crackling energy. The system went ballistic. Warning! Power output detected at 100%. Strength parameter exceeds structural limits by 5,000%. Calculating battle outcome. A new window popped up, stark and horrifying. Projected result of current action. Target rock formation will be obliterated. User's right arm will be obliterated. User's torso will suffer catastrophic shockwave damage. HP cost will exceed maximum HP. And at the bottom, a single, blinking line of red text. Result, self-termination. The gamer's body passive, which protected him from external harm, offered no defense against self-inflicted damage of this magnitude. If he threw this punch, he would literally punch himself to death. Panic, cold and absolute, tried to seize him. But gamer's mind slammed the lid on it, converting the terror into pure, focused processing power. His wisdom and intelligence stats flared. This wasn't a binary punch or don't punch situation. In every game he'd ever played, powerful abilities had a charge time, a meter, a slider. He didn't have to go from 0 to 100. Cancel the cast. Lower the power level. His mind screamed. He could feel the power as a tangible thing, a raging river in his arm. He didn't try to stop it, he tried to redirect it. To bleed it off. In his mind's eye, he saw a glowing power meter, a vertical bar slammed all the way to the top, labeled 100%. With a grunt of pure mental effort, he grabbed that metaphorical slider and yanked it down. The raging energy in his arm resisted, fighting him. The red cracks flickered violently. The meter dropped. 90%. 80%. It was like trying to wrestle a god. His concentration was absolute. Down, down, down it went. He could feel the pressure lessening, the insane power becoming less of an explosion and more of a controlled burn. He didn't know what a safe number was. He just pulled it down until it felt stable. The slider settled at the very bottom. Power output, 5%. It felt manageable. It still felt like more power than he had ever known, but it was no longer threatening to tear him apart. He took one more breath, his eyes snapping open, his gaze locked on the rock. Smash! He threw the punch. It wasn't the city-shaking explosion of an all-might smash. There was no hurricane. But the sound was like nothing he'd ever produced before. It was a sharp, concussive whump that seemed to crack the air itself. His fist stopped an inch from the rock's surface, but the force projected from it did not. The solid stone didn't just break. It disintegrated. The front of the rock formation exploded into a cloud of dust and gravel, showering the sand with pebbles. A perfectly round, crater-like indentation was left behind, smoke wafting from its center. Izuku stared, his mouth agape. His arm wasn't broken. It wasn't shattered. It wasn't even bleeding. It hurt. A lot. A deep, searing fire burned through his muscles and bones, a sharp protest from his body for being used as a conduit for such power, even at a low level. HP 950/1000. Status effect applied, strained muscles, minor. Description: overexertion of muscle fibers due to FA backlash. STR temporarily reduced by 5%. His HP had dropped by 5%, and he had a minor debuff. But his arm was intact. He could move his fingers. He flexed his hand, wincing at the deep ache. It was a survivable, manageable consequence. He had done it. He had used one for all and survived. More than that, he had controlled it. He turned to look at All Might. The hero's jaw was on the floor. His cigarette, a habit he only indulged in his weak form, had fallen from his lips into the sand. He stared at Izuku's intact arm, then at the pulverized rock, then back at the arm. His mind, for the first time since Izuku had met him, was completely and utterly blank with shock. You didn't break," Toshinori whispered, his voice filled with disbelief. "It hurts," Izuku admitted, cradling his right arm. "A lot. But yeah? It's not broken." "How?" Toshinori stepped forward, gently taking Izuku's arm and inspecting it. There were no grotesque angles, no protruding bones. Just a boy wincing from muscle pain. "I was so sure. The first time I used it, I broke 3 limbs. My master, Nana Shimura, broke both her legs. It's a rite of passage. The power is too great. It's supposed to break its new vessel. That's how you learn its terrible cost." He looked into Izuku's eyes, searching for an answer. "But you unleashed it, and you held together. Not just that, but the power you released, it was small, precise. It wasn't the full, uncontrollable flood. It was controlled." "How did you do that on your first try?" Izuku's mind raced, fabricating a plausible explanation. "When I felt it building up, it was too much. I knew if I let it all out, well, you saw the look on my face. I thought I was going to explode," he started, which was true. "So I tried to hold it back? Like I didn't try to stop it, but I tried to only let a little bit of it through. Like opening a faucet, just a tiny crack instead of all the way." He demonstrated by clenching and unclenching his fist. "I could feel the whole ocean of it, but I just tried to let out a single cup. It was really hard. But I guess it worked." The faucet analogy was the best he could come up with. It was a gross oversimplification of his mental struggle with a system UI, but it was grounded in a physical concept. Toshinori stared at him for a long, silent moment. The expression on his face was one he had never worn before, pure, unadulterated all. He had chosen this boy for his heart. He had trained him for his body, but he was slowly realizing that the boy's mind might be his most powerful asset of all. "Unbelievable," Toshinori finally breathed out, shaking his head. "To have that level of instinctive, fine motor control over an explosive, alien power source from the very first second. That's not talent. That's not genius. That's a miracle." He backed away, a wide, slightly manic grin spreading across his face. "You're even more amazing than I thought, my boy. You didn't just become a vessel, you built a control valve for a tsunami on your first attempt." "Ahahaha." His booming laughter echoed across the clean beach. Izuku's secret was safe, buried under a new pile of All Might's ever-growing, mistaken assumptions about his prodigal nature. Izuku looked down at his right arm, a faint green spark of OFA energy still dancing around his knuckles. The pain was already beginning to fade as his high END stat and the gamer's body passive kicked in his natural recovery. He looked at the shattered rock. He had a quirk. Not just any quirk, but the greatest quirk. And he had a system that allowed him to interact with it, to quantify it, to control it in a way none of its previous wielders ever could. He could see the percentages. He could manage the output. The risk of self-destruction wasn't gone, but it was no longer a blind certainty. It was a calculated risk he could manage. The UE exam was in 2 hours. He was walking in with a weapon that could level the entire testing ground. The only question was whether he had the skill to wield it without blowing himself up in the process. He grinned, a true, confident grin. This was going to be fun. The entrance to UA High School was less a gate and more a declaration. The iconic arching UA logo loomed over a vast courtyard, a symbol of hope and excellence that broadcast its message for miles. To Izuku Midoriya, it had always been a sacred temple, a distant, unattainable dream. Today, as he stood before it, the dream felt terrifyingly within reach. Throngs of nervous teenagers flowed past him, a vibrant and intimidating menagerie of quirks and personalities. He saw a girl with long, vine-like hair, a boy whose skin was made of jagged, purple rock, and another who shot what looked like laser beams from his navel. For a decade, a sight like this would have filled him with a potent cocktail of awe and soul-crushing inadequacy. Today, it was different. His observer skill was working overtime, a constant, passive stream of information flowing into his perception. Ibara Shiozaki, LVL 16, quirk, vines, emotional state, piously serene. Aijiro Kurishima, LVL 17, quirk, hardening, emotional state, manly and pumped up. Yuga Oyama, LVL 16, quirk, navel laser, emotional state, fabulously anxious. He wasn't just seeing their quirks, he was seeing them as people. People with levels not that much higher than his own. People who were just as nervous as he was. The data demystified them, grounding them from untouchable paragons of power into what they were, his competition. His peers. He took a deep breath, the cool morning air filling his lungs. He could still feel one for all residing within him, a deep, silent reservoir of power. It was a comforting, terrifying presence, like carrying a miniature sun in his pocket. He had spent the hour after leaving All Might meditating, focusing on the feeling of the power, on the mental slider that controlled its output. He could now consistently call upon a 1% or 2% surge without any significant backlash, a feat that still boggled his mind. Out of my way, Deku! The voice, a familiar, angry rasp, cut through his concentration. Izuku turned to see Katsuki Bakugo striding past, his hands shoved deep in his pockets, his shoulders hunched with aggressive energy. Izuku's observer tag for him flickered to life. Katsuki Bakugo, LVL 18, quirk, explosion, emotional state, enraged, confused, arrogant. The confused tag was new. It had appeared after the sludge villain incident and hadn't left. Bakugo shot him a glare, a complex look that mixed his usual contempt with a sliver of something else, something uncertain. It was the look of a predator that had seen its prey do something impossible. He clearly didn't understand why Izuku, the quirkless, useless Deku, was even here. Don't you go thinking you can look down on me! Bakugo snarled before stomping off towards the main building. I'll kill you! The threat was automatic, devoid of its usual heat. It was a reflex. Izuku just watched him go, a strange sense of pity mixing with his apprehension. He and Kaken were on a collision course, and for the first time, Izuku felt like he might not be the one to break. He took his first step towards his dream, and immediately tripped over his own feet. The world tilted, the pavement rushing up to meet his face. Really? His mind screamed. After all that training, all that growth, I'm going to enter UA by face-planting like an idiot? He braced for impact, but it never came. He stopped, hovering an inch from the ground, a strange, weightless sensation enveloping him. He felt a light tap on his shoulder. Whoa there! Are you okay? A bright, cheerful voice asked. He was gently righted, his feet settling back on the ground. He turned to see a girl with a round, friendly face, rosy cheeks, and a short brown bob. Her fingers were still extended from having touched him. Observer instantly supplied the details. Achiko Uraraka, LVL 16, quirk, zero gravity, emotional state, cheerful, nervous. It's my quirk, she explained, pressing the pads of her fingertips together. Sorry for using it on you without asking, but it would have been bad luck to fall right before the exam, right? Izuku's brain, which could process combat data and quantum physics analogies for his power, completely short-circuited in the face of a friendly girl. Thank fall you, he stammered, his face erupting in a blush so intense it felt hot. A system notification popped up, almost mockingly. Charisma check failed. Uraraka just giggled, a sound like little bells. Well, I'm super nervous too. Good luck in there. She gave him a wave and hurried inside. Izuku stood frozen for a moment, his heart hammering for an entirely different reason. As he watched her go, a new notification appeared, this one far more pleasant. A positive social interaction has occurred through an act of kindness. 1 to charisma, 1 to heroism. He blinked. He had gained stats just by being saved from his own clumsiness. This system was full of surprises. He shook his head, a small smile on his face, and finally walked into the hallowed halls of UA. Hi. The written exam was a blur of complex questions that he navigated with the aid of his high INT stat. But the real event was the orientation for the practical exam, held in a massive auditorium. All the hero hopefuls were gathered, a sea of anxious energy. On the stage, bathed in spotlights, was the voice hero, Present Mike. Observer tagged him instantly. Hisashi Yamada, Present Mike LVL? Quirk voice. Welcome to today's live performance, everybody! He screamed, and the sheer volume made the air vibrate. Are you ready? Silence. Present Mike explained the practical exam. They would be sent into massive, simulated urban environments. Their goal was to fight and defeat villains, robots of varying difficulty, worth 1, 2, or 3 points respectively. The goal was simple: rack up as many points as possible in the time limit. As he spoke, a new quest alert filled Izuku's vision. Main quest, UA entrance exam. The final gateway to your dreams stands before you. Prove you have what it takes to be a hero. Primary objective, score a minimum of 60 villain points to pass. Reward, admission to UA High. Title, UA student, large EXP bonus. Failure, dream ends. Return to being a quirkless civilian. Hidden objective, 60 points. It was a high bar. A dauntingly high bar. He looked around the auditorium. Everyone else had quirks they could use freely. He had a nuke, but every time he set it off, it damaged the launch site. He had to be strategic. He had to be efficient. A tall, broad-shouldered boy with dark blue hair and glasses stood up, chopping the air with his hand. Observer flagged him as Tenya Ida, LVL 17. He pointed out a detail on the handout, a 4th type of robot. Sir, on the printout, there are 4 types of villains. If this is a misprint, UA, the most prestigious school in Japan, should be ashamed of itself. He declared robotically. Present Mike grinned. Excellent listening skills, examinee 7111. The 4th type is the arena trap. A gimmick that rampages through the city. It's worth 0 points. Think of it as a giant, mobile obstacle. My advice is to run away. An obstacle. A 0-pointer. Izuku's analytical mind immediately filed that away. There was no reward for fighting it, so engaging it was a waste of time and energy. It was a test of risk assessment. He was so lost in thought, mumbling to himself about point-to-energy expenditure ratios, that he didn't notice Ida marching over to his row. The taller boy stopped and pointed a rigid finger at him. And you, Ida declared, his voice ringing with authority. With the curly hair. You have been muttering and distracting everyone this entire time. If you are not taking this seriously, then you should leave. Several heads turned to look at him. Izuku's face went crimson. He clamped his mouth shut, mortified. Another failed charisma check. This was not going well. They were herded onto buses and driven to their assigned battle centers. Izuku found himself at Battle Center B, standing before a pair of colossal gates that sealed off a sprawling, artificial cityscape. The scale was breathtaking. He was standing with the same group from the auditorium, including the kind girl, Uraraka, and the stern boy, Ida. He took a moment to center himself, closing his eyes and taking deep breaths. He opened his status screen, looking over his stats one last time. He had 15 skill points saved up. He could upgrade Dash for more mobility or pour more points into Power Strike, but he decided against it. He would hold them in reserve, ready to adapt to whatever the exam threw at him. He was a strategist now, not just a brute. Ayan. Start! Present Mick's voice blared from hidden speakers. The massive gates slid open. Everyone stood frozen for a second, confused. What's wrong? There are no countdowns in a real fight. Run! Run! The die is cast! That snapped everyone into action. The crowd surged forward. A boy with blonde hair and a sparkling quirk zoomed past. Ida, with engines flaring from his calves, shot off like a bullet. Izuku was left in the dust, but he wasn't panicking. Gamer's mind kept him cool. He took a breath and activated his own movement skill. Skill activate dash. A faint blue aura flared around his legs. His AGI of 40 was already impressive, but the skill amplified it, launching him forward in a burst of speed that was far beyond a normal human sprint. He ate up the ground, his enhanced stamina from 10 months of training keeping him from tiring. He rounded the first corner, and came face to face with his first opponent. It was a sleek green robot with a single red eye, rolling forward on a treaded wheel. The system immediately provided a detailed analysis. Villain bot 1 pointer, type scout unit, armor, light steel plating, weakness, exposed optical sensor, unarmored wheel joint. It lunged, a metal claw extending from its chassis. Izuku didn't even think. He dashed to the side, the claw scraping uselessly against the pavement where he'd been standing. He didn't need a smash for this. This was a job for his base stats and a little bit of tactical thinking. He grabbed a discarded length of steel pipe from a pile of rubble on the sidewalk, a familiar feeling. He activated Power Strike, pouring a tiny bit of SP into the swing. He brought the pipe down hard on the robot's wheel joint, exactly where Observer had indicated the weakness was. There was a crunch of metal, and the robot's wheel buckled. It listed to one side, immobilized. A small light on its chassis flickered from red to gray. 1 pointer villain defeated, 1 villain point, 100 EXP. It was that easy. He didn't have to obliterate it, just disable it. This was the key. Overkill was inefficient. Precision was everything. He sprinted deeper into the city. A pair of 2 pointers, bulkier and more heavily armed, blocked an intersection. Villain bot 2 pointer, type assault unit, armor, reinforced plating, weakness, exposed power conduit on back panel, ventilation grating beneath chassis. One fired a volley of rubber bullets at him. He used dash and short, controlled bursts, weaving between the projectiles like a dancer. He slid under the first robot, jamming the steel pipe up into its ventilation grating. There was a shower of sparks and the robot seized up, defeated. The second one turned to face him. He didn't have time for another melee attack. This was the moment to test his control. He held up his left hand, focusing. He visualized the slider in his mind, pulling it up just a fraction of an inch. 1%. That's all I need. A faint, almost invisible green spark danced around his middle finger. He flicked it. Skill activated, 1 for all power flick, LVL1. A tiny bullet of compressed air, no bigger than a marble, shot across the street. It struck the 2-pointer square in its red eye sensor. The result wasn't an explosion, but a sharp crack. The sensor shattered, and the robot slumped, its internal systems shorting out. 2-pointer villain defeated, 2 villain points, 200 EXP. Izuku stared at his finger. There was no pain. No backlash. At 1%, the power was so minuscule that his body, now a fortress of END65, could handle it without any negative effects. He had a spammable, non-lethal, ranged attack. A wide, feral grin spread across his face. Oh, this is going to be a slaughter. He became a whirlwind of green lightning and tactical destruction. He abandoned the pipe and relied on his own body. He used dash to navigate the urban battlefield, his high AGI and END allowing him to scale buildings and leap across rooftops, giving him a bird's-eye view of the battlefield. From above, he could spot clusters of robots and plan his attacks. Observer fed him a constant stream of tactical data, weak points, patrol patterns, environmental hazards he could use to his advantage. He would drop down behind a 3-pointer, a hulking, tank-like machine, and deliver a power strike-enhanced kick to a weak spot on its leg joint, toppling it. He'd follow up with a 1% power flick to its main processor to finish it off. For smaller bots, he didn't even need OFA. His base STR of 65 was more than enough to let him rip panels off and tear out wiring with his bare hands. He was a force of nature, perfectly blending superhuman power with tactical genius. His point count soared. 10 points. 25 points. 48 points. He found a central plaza where a huge number of bots had converged on another group of students. They were struggling, overwhelmed. Izuku saw his chance. He leaped onto a nearby rooftop. "Hey!" he yelled, drawing the attention of half a dozen bots. He began to systematically dismantle them from a distance. A 1% power flick shattered a 1-pointer's sensor. Another flick disabled a 2-pointer's weapon arm. He was like an artillery sniper, providing support and picking off targets with surgical precision. The other students stared in awe as the seemingly unstoppable robots were disabled one by an unseen force. He landed in the middle of the plaza, his score now sitting at a very comfortable 58 points. He just needed one more kill. He spotted a lone 2-pointer turning a corner. Easy pickings, and then the ground began to shake. A deep, groaning tremor ran through the entire city block. A colossal shadow fell over the plaza, blotting out the sun. The other students, who had been starting to recover, froze in terror. Izuku looked up. And up. And up. Towering over the multi-story buildings was a robot of unimaginable scale. It was easily 20 stories tall, a green metal Goliath with a massive head and disproportionately huge arms. Its single red eye glowed with malevolent purpose. This was it. The 0-pointer. Villain bot 0-pointer. Type arena trap. Armor. Super heavy reinforced alloy, impenetrable by conventional means. Weakness? The question marks were the most terrifying part. The system itself couldn't find an immediate weak point. It was designed to be an insurmountable obstacle. Panic erupted. "It's the 0-pointer! Run! We have to run away!" Everyone turned and fled, a mad scramble to escape the behemoth's path. Ida, his engines roaring, was among the first to get clear. It was the logical choice. The smart choice. Izuku turned to run as well. He had 58 points. His mission was all but complete. There was no reason to stay, and then he heard a small, pained cry. "Ow!" He stopped. His head whipped around. There, lying in the path of the advancing giant, was a pile of rubble, and trapped underneath it, her leg pinned at an awkward angle, was the girl with the kind smile and the gravity quirk. Achiko Uraraka. She was trying to push the heavy concrete slab off her leg, but it wouldn't budge. She looked up at the approaching robot, her face pale with terror. In that instant, the quest, the points, the exam, all of it became meaningless noise. Izuku's heroism stat, his highest stat, began to glow with a fierce, burning light. The world seemed to slow down, the frantic screams of the other students fading into a distant hum. All he could see was a person in danger. All he could hear was his own heart, beating a frantic, resolute drum against his ribs. His body moved before he could think. A new quest notification blared in his vision, its border a flashing, urgent red. Urgent quest. A true hero saves others. Objective. Save Achiko Uraraka from the 0-pointer. Reward, massive EXP. Reputation with Achiko Uraraka greatly increased. Failure. Severe injury or death of Achiko Uraraka. He wasn't running away from the robot. He was running towards it. His mind, cleared by Gamer's mind, became a supercomputer running 1,000,000 calculations a second. Analysis. Melee attack is impossible. The target is too high. Ranged attack required. Problem. 1% power flick will not be enough to even dent its armor. Need overwhelming force. Solution. A full power smash. A 100% output. He remembered the warning from that morning. Result. Self-termination. He couldn't use his arm. A punch would shatter his arm and the shockwave would probably liquefy his organs. But the power didn't have to come from his arms. He was sprinting, his powerful legs eating up the distance. He focused, channeling the entirety of One for All, the whole raging, infinite ocean of it, not into his fist, but down, into his legs. The system screamed at him. Warning! Power output at 100%. Legs are exceeding structural limits. Catastrophic damage imminent. He ignored it. He overrode it. This was a conscious choice. He was sacrificing his legs to save someone. It was a worthy trade. He was 50 meters from the robot. He bent his knees, coiling his body like a spring. The ground beneath his feet cracked and splintered under the sheer, unimaginable pressure. Red lightning, thick as his arm, cackled and danced around his legs. He looked up at the robot's giant, impassive metal face. And he jumped. The world exploded. The sound was not a sound. It was a physical event, a sonic boom that shattered every window for 3 blocks. He didn't jump so much as he launched, a green and red missile fired from the earth. He shot upwards, clearing 10, 15, 20 stories in a single, breathtaking second. He was airborne, soaring, a temporary god in the sky. He flew past the robot's torso, past its shoulders, until he was level with its head. He drew back his right arm, the one he had saved, the one that was still whole. He didn't need 100% for the punch. The jump had provided the kinetic energy. He just needed to deliver it. He dialed the power slider in his mind to a devastating, but hopefully survivable, 80%. He poured it all into his fist. He roared, a cry of pure, cathartic power, and threw the punch. Smayawash! His fist met the 0-pointer's faceplate. The resulting impact was apocalyptic. The robot's head didn't just dent. It caved in, collapsing on itself like a tin can. The shockwave from the blow rippled down its entire body, a visible wave of force that buckled its metal frame. The giant behemoth shuddered, its single red eye flickering out for good. It began to teeter, its colossal weight now dead and unbalanced. And then the pain hit Izuku. HP 1000/1000 to 50/1000. The system's health display plummeted to a critical red. A litany of status effects scrolled down his vision, a horrific receipt for his heroic act. Status effect applied, shattered right arm, severe. Status effect applied, shattered left leg, critical. Status effect applied, shattered right leg, critical. Status effect applied, massive internal bleeding. The 80% smash had wrecked his arm, and the 100% jump had utterly destroyed his legs. They were useless, mangled appendages of broken bone and torn muscle. The pain was a white-hot nova, a physical sensation so absolute it transcended pain and became a state of being. If not for Gamer's mind, he would have passed out or died from the shock. He was falling. The sky wheeled around him as his broken body tumbled back towards the earth. He had won. He had saved her. But he had miscalculated the aftermath. He was 20 stories up with no way to stop his fall. The ground rushed up to meet him. So this is it, he thought, a strange calm settling over him. I saved someone. I was a hero. I guess that's enough. Release! A voice from below. A warm, weightless sensation suddenly enveloped him again. His rapid descent slowed dramatically, as if he were falling through water. He looked down and saw Uraraka, now free from the rubble, her hand outstretched towards him, her face pale and strained. She had used her quirk on him. He was still falling, but slowly now. Just before he hit the ground, she clapped her hands together. Sorry! She called up, and he landed on the pavement with a jarring, but survivable, thud. The world swam. Black spots danced in his vision. His HP was critical. He could feel his life slipping away. Then, he heard a new set of system notifications, the chimes soft and gentle, a stark contrast to the violent alarms of a moment ago. Urgent quest. A true hero saves others complete. Massive EXP, heroism, and reputation rewards gained. You have reached level 26. You have reached level 27. Hidden objective revealed completed. Earn rescue points. By prioritizing the safety of another examinee over your own points and well-being, you have demonstrated the ultimate heroic spirit. This action has been recognized by the judges. Rescue points awarded, 60. Final score, 58 villain points. 60 rescue points equals 118 points. Exam result pass. He managed a weak, bloody smile. He did it. He had passed. All right, that's time. Present Mick's voice boomed through the silent, ruined cityscape. The exam was over. Examinees started to creep back into the plaza, their faces a mixture of terror and awe. They stared at the fallen 0-pointer, then at the broken boy lying in the center of the crater his jump had created. Then, a tiny, elderly woman in a hero costume, recovery girl, bustled onto the scene. She came over to Izuku, tut-tutting. My. To do this to your own body. You've got guts, kid, but not a lot of sense, she said. She leaned over and gave him a soft kiss on the forehead. Her lips extended into a syringe-like mouthpart for a moment. Recovery Girl's quirk heal has been activated. Your body's natural healing process is being hyper-accelerated. using large amounts of stamina to fuel regeneration. His SP bar, which was full, drained to empty in seconds. A warm, soothing energy spread through him. He could feel his bones grinding and knitting themselves back together, his torn muscles reweaving. The process was bizarre and slightly nauseating, but the all-consuming pain began to recede. Status effect: shattered right arm removed. Status effect: shattered left leg removed. Status effect: shattered right leg removed. HP: 50/1000 to 950/1000. New status effect applied: bone fatigue severe. Description: your bones have undergone rapid, forced healing. They are brittle and prone to re-injury. Avoid high-impact activities. He was healed, but with a penalty. A fair trade. He sat up, shaky and drained but whole. He looked around. All the other students were staring at him. He saw awe, confusion, and in some cases, fear. He saw Uraraka, being tended to by medics, giving him a shaky but grateful smile. He saw Ida, his face a mask of profound shock and reconsideration. He had witnessed Izuku abandon all logic and points to save someone, an act that defied his entire worldview. In the observation room high above the city, a group of pro-heroes watched the monitors in stunned silence. That kid, he's insane, one of them murmured. But did you see that power? Another added. It's like a rookie All Might. A skeletal, withered figure in the back of the room watched the screen showing Izuku's broken but triumphant form. A small, proud smile touched Toshinori Yagi's lips. The boy had not only inherited his power, but he had also, in his very first trial, perfectly embodied its spirit. He hadn't just passed the test. He had redefined it.